Different day, different cat. Ignore him. You're supposed to be listening. Well, I guess you could listen to me and watch him, but there he goes, looking at the camera. What a hog. And so we have two kings, Oedipus and Arthur, separated by literally thousands of years, but bound by their archetypal similarities. And so both have fit the hero mold in some aspects, and yet they differ in some aspects. Oedipus' quest is to find what sin, evil, has been committed in his country that is so great that blights the land and makes the people go hungry and diseased. Arthur is in a similar situation, whereas evil has entered into his kingdom, and he must quest in order to find what the problem is. Now, there's a big difference here between Oedipus and Arthur. Oedipus goes upon this quest himself. He does all of the work to ferret out what the problem is. Arthur, on the other hand, really does not leave Camelot. He is physically incapacitated, and it is his knights who go out on the quest to find the Holy Grail. Now, Arthur is a fisher king, and I'm not going to go into that because that is an entirely different archetype or myth from what I want to emphasize here. And so Arthur's quest, even though he's not the one out questing, is to find the Holy Grail. And when he finds the Grail, it will set everything right in the kingdom. Kinda. Because before things can be set right in the kingdom, Arthur has to rejuvenate himself, which is what the Grail does for him, and he has to go out to battle, which is what happens. And so Percival finds the Grail. He is the most honorable and most innocent and best knight. Lancelot has been reduced to living out into the woods as a wild man. Guinevere has gone to a nunnery. And again, I'm talking about the most recent and well-known versions of the Tale of Camelot. And so Arthur regains himself and goes out into battle against the forces that Mordred has gathered. Now, Mordred, like the children of Oedipus and Jocasta, is a product of I don't like to use the word unholy alliance, but that is what it would have been viewed as by those Christians who had rewritten this tale as apart from the pagan ideology, and the themes still remain and the ideology still remains, but this would have been considered an unholy alliance, and Mordred was a child who should not have been produced, as Jocasta and Oedipus' children should not have been produced. Mordred fits the hero's concept in a couple of ways as well, and of course the first one is that he was conceived by magical means. His mother Morgana was disguised as Guinevere, and he is raised apart from his father. Now, unlike other heroes who were raised apart from their father, Mordred was raised to know who his father was and to hate his father. And so Mordred and Arthur meet in battle. Arthur slays Mordred, and Mordred is said to have rejected Arthur's attempts at reconciliation, or maybe conciliation. Maybe there's no reconciliation because there was no conciliation. But in the battle, Arthur is dealt a debilitating blow, and he knows that he is going to die. And when he does, he tells Percival to take Excalibur and go throw it back into the lake. And Percival says, okay, I will. But he goes down to the shores of the lake 3 times before he's finally able to throw the sword into the lake and dispose of it. And Arthur knows that his knight is lying to him, because when he comes back and Arthur says, what did you see when you threw the sword? And Percival says, I just saw the wind upon the lake. And of course, he needed to say, I saw a lady come up and stick her hand out and grab the sword. But this is not the end of Arthur. when Oedipus blinds himself and it becomes propitiation, the blindness and the wandering becomes a propitiation for the evil that he has committed. Arthur is mortally wounded, but he does not die. 3 women come to bear him away to Avalon, and it is said that he sleeps there until Britain needs him again. And you notice I don't say England, because at this point in time, Britain was not England. England did not become the land of the Angles until the Anglo-Saxons came, and they came after Arthur. So it was not England at this time. But it is said that he sleeps in Avalon until he is needed by England/Britain again. This is the dying and resurrected, not deity, because Arthur is not a deity, but he becomes in a sense a dying deity, because deities are immortal. Now that doesn't mean that Arthur is immortal, but he has more alike with those gods than he does with Oedipus, who is not, there is no promise of resurrection for Oedipus. Now, Avalon is an interesting concept because it is to the west, and there is throughout many myths the enchanted isles, the blessed isles that lie somewhere to usually the west, and the 3 women who come to bear Arthur to Avalon are usually described as the three Marys: Mary Magdalene, Mary the sister of Martha, and the Virgin Mary. But they are much, much, much older than Christianity, and much, much more likely are a holdover from pagan ideology and the aspect of the triple goddess who would have lived in Avalon, and that would have been the province of that goddess. Whether it is the Morrigan, who is a triple goddess, whether it is Bridget, a triple goddess, I don't know. But I am quite sure that that is what this originally represented, and again was Christianized in order to make it palatable to a Christian audience. But the whole myth, the whole legend retains many, many aspects of its original pagan themes: the dying and resurrected deity, the 3 women who come to bear him away, how Arthur is conceived by magical means, and of course Merlin, who again predates Arthur. The story of Merlin's predate Arthur. Merlin is most likely supposed to be a druid, which was the priestly caste of the Celtic society or the Celtic culture. Some other myths that arose from the Arthurian tales was that Merlin constructed Stonehenge from Arthur, and he had brought the stones even from as far away from Ireland in order to build this. And for centuries, this was accepted as historical fact. We now know, of course, that Stonehenge far predates the Celts and goes back to before BCE, before the Christian era. And so that was one myth that was kind of exploded with the advent of modern science and the ability to carbon date. And of course, they couldn't carbon date the stones, but they could carbon date other things there. We learn new things about Stonehenge all the time. But that was the original explanation for how Stonehenge was built and why it exists. So we have these 2 kings, to reiterate, that were separated again by time and by culture, but are bound by their archetypal resemblances. They were both fit the hero mode in that they were born. They were actually both fated to perform the roles that they performed. They were raised apart from their biological parents. The sidekicks, Oedipus not so much, but we see Arthur with a lot of sidekicks, including Merlin and all the knights of his round table, including the later addition of Lancelot. We see them both have a country, kings of countries, and those countries are blighted or put in a state of plague and pestilence and hunger by things that the king should know and that's a big word to use there, because how could they know? They were both victims of circumstance, but that didn't matter. But they had to find the key. They had to find the key in order to unlock the mystery of their countries and set things to right. And in order to do that, both situations needed a propitiation for their sins, for lack of a better word. We see this propitiation back in the, ouch, that hurts. Back in Inanna. Inanna needed to find a propitiation and someone to take her place, which basically is a sacrifice. Arthur is a Christ figure, and he is a Christ figure because he saves his people by sacrificing himself. I don't see Oedipus so much as a Christ figure as is Arthur, but that image of the Savior who is willing to sacrifice him or herself in order to help the people. We also see this with Prometheus. Prometheus is an early Christ figure because he is willing to sacrifice himself in order to save his offspring. And Arthur is also a Christ figure in that he has the promise of resurrection in order to further save his people in the future. There is a modern book, The Crying of Lot 49, 59. I really should look these things up before I write it down, but I think, oh, I know that. Why should I write that down? And it is a modern retelling of the Oedipal myth. And Oedipus goes on a quest in order to find out what is wrong with her country, which is the United States. So if you ever have a chance to read that book, I do recommend it. If you're interested in the Oedipus myth, I do recommend that you read it. I have not read it since I was an undergrad, but you know something? I need to reread that book. I'm going to stop there. There is a PowerPoint that also delineates many of the points that I made here. But I want to talk about a modern set of heroes, Luke and Anakin Skywalker, and how they correspond with the ancient heroes and share the same kind of commonalities.